the air thick with the scent of hothouse lilies and a battleground of expensive perfumes, tasted of old money and new ambition. A string quartet tucked into a corner of the grand atrium sawed away at a tense, modern piece, all dissonant chords and frantic, complex runs of the bow that felt like anxiety given musical form. Their melody was a fragile skin stretched over the deep, percussive thrum of 100 privileged conversations, punctuated by the sharp clink of crystal against teeth and the rustle of silk and taffeta. The floor was a dizzying sea of cool, unforgiving marble, reflecting the galaxy of crystal chandeliers overhead, making the entire cavernous space feel both infinite and claustrophobic. It was the Whitman Museum of Art's annual Acquisitions Gala, and the city's elite were out in force, their movements a choreographed dance of air kisses and discreetly exchanged business cards. Sarah Jenkins stood apart from the swirling chaos, a still point in a universe of calculated motion. She wore a simple, elegant column of cream silk that fell gracefully over the gentle swell of her first child. Her hand rested there, a subconscious gesture of communion, feeling the faint, reassuring warmth of the life within. She wasn't looking at the glittering donors with their surgically tightened faces or the obsequious politicians whose smiles never quite reached their eyes. Her gaze was fixed on the new centerpiece of the north wing, a massive, abstract sculpture of interlocking bronze rings, a recent and controversial purchase. To her, it looked like a promise, a future forged from bold, undeniable strength. A shadow fell over the polished floor at her feet, a sudden eclipse in the bright room. "I was hoping I would not find you here." The voice was a low baritone, a sound accustomed to filling boardrooms and bending wills, leaving no room for argument. Arthur Sterling materialized beside her, a monolith in a dark, bespoke suit so perfectly tailored it seemed molded to his formidable frame. He was the director of the Whitman and her boss. He did not look at the sculpture. He looked only at her, his gaze sweeping over her with the cool appraisal of a butcher eyeing a cut of meat. "Arthur!" Sarah's voice was even calm. She refused to let him see her flinch. "It's the gala, the biggest night of our year. Where else would I be?" "I can think of several places," he said, his tone dripping with condescension. "An obstetrician's office, perhaps, or a remedial class on basic clerical skills. It seems your attention has been divided of late. Your focus is not what it once was." He paused, letting the insult hang in the air between them. "This institution, Sarah, this temple of art, does not reward a divided mind. It rewards passion. It demands sacrifice." A strained silence settled between them. He took a step closer, invading her space. His cologne, a sharp, spicy scent like burnt cedar, pricked at her nose, making her want to recoil. A flash of crimson appeared at his elbow. Eleanor Vance, the museum's marketing director, slid into place, a proprietary hand on Arthur's arm. A cascade of heavy gold bangles clattered on her wrist, a sound like falling coins. Her red dress was the color of a fresh wound, tight and unforgiving. "Arthur, darling," Eleanor purred, her eyes fixed on Sarah, holding a triumphant, reptilian cruelty. "Don't exert yourself. Some people are simply not built for this world. They lack the constitution." Sarah's hand tightened on her belly. Fear, cold and sharp, shot through her, a jolt of pure adrenaline. "If there's an issue with my performance, Arthur, your office is the appropriate venue for that discussion, not in the middle of the atrium. He laughed, a short, barking sound devoid of humor. The few people nearest them fell silent, their champagne flutes pausing midair. They turned to watch, their faces a mixture of curiosity and hungry anticipation. The circle of silence began to widen, spreading like a stain. "My office! This is my office!" Arthur's voice boomed, turning a private rebuke into a public spectacle. "This entire museum is my office. Every painting, every sculpture, every priceless artifact within these walls is a testament to my vision, my curation, my relentless pursuit of perfection." He gestured grandly, his voice rising, capturing the attention of more guests. The string quartet faltered, the first violin's note souring into a screech before the music died out completely. "And you, Sarah, you have become a flaw in that perfection, a smudge on the canvas." The grand atrium seemed to hold its breath. Sarah felt the heat rise in her cheeks, a humiliating flush. Her chin rose. She would not be cowed. "I don't know what you're talking about." "You don't know," he thundered, his voice now a public proclamation. "You don't know about the shipping manifest for the Grecian amphorae, the one you approved? The one that sent them to a warehouse in Brussels instead of our restoration facility in Bern? A clerical error, you called it. A $1 million clerical error that has left a 2,000-year-old treasure in limbo." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Faces turned, no longer pretending not to stare. They were sharks, smelling blood in the water, their eyes gleaming in the crystal light. "That was a Port Authority mistake," Sarah said, her voice strained but steady, though it felt like pushing against a physical weight. "I have the paperwork to prove it." "Do you?" Arthur took another step, his face inches from hers. His breath was hot and smelled of whiskey. "And do you have the paperwork to explain the provenance report for the Donatello? The one you filed with a glaring 2-year gap in its history of ownership? A gap that our most generous benefactor, Mr. Abernathy, pointed out to me at lunch today? He was not pleased. He questioned my leadership. He questioned my eye. Because of you." Each word was a stone, and he was building a wall around her, brick by painful brick. She could feel 100 pairs of eyes on her, dissecting her, judging her. Her cream dress felt less like a statement of purity and more like a surrender flag. This was not a discussion. This was an execution. "Arthur, please!" The words were a whisper, lost in the cavernous space. The ground dissolved, a sickening slide into public abyss. Her breathing grew shallow. Across the now silent atrium, a young woman in a staff blazer paused, her hands holding a tray of empty champagne flutes. Maria Rodriguez, the new junior curatorial assistant, stood perfectly still. Her dark, intelligent eyes absorbed every detail. Arthur's aggressive posture, Eleanor's venomous smirk, and the way Sarah's hand protectively cradled her stomach. She did not move. She just watched. Eleanor let out a small, theatrical sigh, loud enough for those nearby to hear. "It's the pregnancy, you know," she said to the woman beside her, a prominent board member whose face was a mask of rapt fascination. "Scrambles the mind." The gold on her wrist gleamed as she patted Arthur's chest, a gesture of both comfort and reward. That was all the fuel he needed. "Ha! Whoa!" "I have given you every opportunity," Arthur declared, his voice ringing with the finality of a judge's gavel. "I brought you in. I mentored you. I believed you had the singular focus required for this work, but it's clear your priorities have shifted. Your body is otherwise occupied. Your mind has followed." He gestured dismissively at her stomach, a flick of the wrist that erased her personhood. "The Whitman Museum of Art cannot afford to be a nursery for your maternal ambitions." A collective gasp went through the room, a sharp, sibilant intake of breath that was part horror, part thrill. It was monstrous. It was magnificent theater. Sarah stood frozen. The roaring in her ears drowned out whispers. Her world irrevocably torn apart. Escape was the only path. Her hand was a shield over her unborn daughter, Amelia. She felt disconnected, watching her life fall apart. He leaned in, his voice dropping to a venomous whisper meant only for her. But his posture, a predator coiled to strike, was for everyone. "Your association with this institution has become a liability, a series of costly, embarrassing mistakes. Therefore, as of this moment, your employment is terminated." He paused, letting the words land with their full, devastating weight. The air crackled with the impact. "You are fired." He turned his back on her. As if she had ceased to exist, Eleanor, with one last glittering smirk at Sarah, looped her arm through his. The sea of guests parted for them as they walked away, a king and his new, triumphant queen, leaving a wake of whispers and shattered silence behind them. A palpable shock lingered in the air. The whispers followed her, clinging like burrs to her silk dress, but Sarah heard only the roaring in her own ears. The very air, moments ago charged with venom, now felt suffocatingly thin. Her world had just been irrevocably torn apart, and the only path forward was an escape from this gilded cage. A dull, oppressive roar vibrated deep within her skull. Each breath a sharp gasp against suffocating pressure. The polished marble tilted beneath her, a treacherous, broken mirror. Whispers, once distant, became a crushing, inescapable weight. Her silk dress, a garment of dignity, now felt like a suffocating shroud. She needed to move. Every fiber of her being screamed for escape, away from the avidly staring eyes, the thinly veiled pity that felt like a fresh wound. The undeniable satisfaction glinting in the eyes of Arthur Sterling and his sycophants. Her legs, surprisingly, obeyed the primal urge, carrying her with an unsteady, almost spectral grace towards a discreet exit sign she had passed 100 times and always ignored. A beacon of anonymity. It was a utilitarian rectangle of green and white, almost camouflaged against the gilded splendor of the atrium. This exit, she knew, led not to the bustling street outside, but into the museum's hidden arteries, the cold, unglamorous service corridors and utilitarian stairwells that formed its unseen skeleton. The change was abrupt, a violent severing from one reality to another. One moment, she was enveloped by the glittering, expansive grandeur of the atrium, its high ceilings echoing with the last vestiges of a dying social hum. The next, she found herself in a narrow, claustrophobic hallway, harshly lit by a single, flickering fluorescent tube that cast long, sickly yellow shadows. The intoxicating scent of lilies and perfume vanished utterly, replaced by the acrid, metallic tang of industrial cleaner, sharp and chemical, overlaid with the faint, persistent, dusty smell of concrete and disuse. The air here was colder, still almost damp, a stark, unwelcome contrast to the cloying warmth and manufactured glamour of the gala. The sudden shift in temperature sent a shiver through her, a tremor that had nothing to do with the chill. The muffled rhythmic thrum of the building's massive HVAC system vibrated through the very floor beneath her sensible heels, a constant, low growl that seemed to echo her own internal turmoil. The walls were unforgiving cinder block, painted a bland, institutional gray that seemed to absorb all light and hope. They were scarred with countless scuff marks like old bruises, and the faint, ghostly outlines of removed equipment, suggesting a history of forgotten purpose. No vibrant contemporary art adorned these walls. No plush velvet ropes guided her path. This was the unseen underbelly, the functional, unadorned reality supporting the polished, curated facade she had helped to maintain for so long. She pressed her palm almost instinctively against the cold, rough concrete, seeking an anchor, a desperate confirmation of physical existence, of anything real. Her hand trembled uncontrollably, the rough texture of the wall grounding her even as her world spun. A door, almost indistinguishable from the monotonous gray around it, but marked with a faded, peeling pictogram for staff only, beckoned like a silent, desperate invitation. The image of a stick figure holding a wrench, half obscured by grime, seemed to mock her. She pushed it open with a weak shoulder, the heavy metal groaning faintly on its hinges. It led not into another corridor, but directly into a small, private restroom, the kind rarely used by guests, tucked away and almost forgotten. The sudden, raw sound of her own ragged, desperate breath filled the small, echoing space, amplifying her despair. The harsh overhead fluorescent light hummed, a high-pitched, insistent whine that grated on her nerves, casting a sterile, unforgiving glow on the stark white tiles and the gleaming, cold stainless steel fixtures. It smelled faintly and sickly of strong disinfectant, struggling to mask the underlying scent of stale water and perhaps something older, more stagnant, from pipes long undisturbed. Her reflection in the mirror above the sink was a stranger, gaunt, pale, eyes wide and bloodshot, brimming with unshed tears, a raw, gaping wound of public humiliation etched across her face. Her knees buckled beneath her, a sudden, complete surrender of strength. A sound, half sob, half choked gasp, ripped itself from her throat. She slid down the wall, a slow, painful descent, the rough, abrasive paint scraping against the delicate, expensive silk of her dress. She felt the fabric tear, heard the faint rip, but she registered nothing, the pain of her heart eclipsing all else. The floor was cold, unforgiving tile, sending a shock of icy reality through her, through the thin silk. Her cheek came to rest against the cool, hard surface, a small, fleeting mercy against the searing, burning shame that consumed her from within. The ringing in her ears intensified, transforming into a high-pitched, metallic whine that drowned out all other thought, all other sensation, save the pervasive cold. Her vision blurred, tears welling relentlessly, then overflowing, scalding paths down her temples, disappearing into the roots of her hair. Each breath she took was shallow, painful, a desperate attempt to draw air into lungs that felt compressed by an invisible weight. She instinctively brought both hands to her belly, a primal, protective gesture, as if to shield the one truly precious thing she had left. The baby, her little girl, Amelia. A soft, almost imperceptible flutter, a gentle shifting within, a whisper of life, delicate as a butterfly's wing. It was a faint, stubborn beat against the deafening cacophony of her unraveling world, a tiny, insistent rhythm that cut through the crushing despair, a melody of hope in the heart of the storm. This small, precious life, the only thing that truly mattered, the museum, the job, the carefully curated illusions of status and importance, they were dust, ashes, dissolving into nothingness. But this was real. This was hers, unequivocally. She clung to that thought, to that tiny, vibrant life force, like a drowning woman to a splintered plank, a fragile lifeline in the sudden, crushing dark that had engulfed her. The silence stretched, thick and heavy, punctuated only by her ragged breathing. Alone in the sterile confines of the forgotten restroom, Sarah hugged herself, the tiny flutter within her belly a fragile comfort against the vast, empty despair. But then, a sound from beyond the door, an unexpected intrusion into her private agony, broke the spell. A soft, hesitant knock echoed through the small space, startling her. Sarah froze, every muscle in her body tensing, her breath catching in her throat. She hadn't locked the door. She hadn't even thought to. Panic, cold and sharp, seized her again. The door creaked open slowly, reluctantly, revealing Maria Rodriguez, the junior curatorial assistant she barely knew, framed in the doorway. Maria stood there, not intruding, but simply present. She held a small plastic bottle of water, its condensation glistening, and a crisp white hand towel folded neatly over her arm. Her eyes, dark and intelligent, held not judgment or pity, but a quiet, steady compassion that surprised Sarah with its intensity. Maria said nothing, simply walked in, her footsteps barely audible on the cold, tiled floor, a soft hush that was almost reverent. The door closed softly behind her, sealing them into their shared, sterile sanctuary. Maria knelt beside Sarah, her movements unhurried, offering a silent, powerful presence without demanding anything in return. She unscrewed the cap of the water bottle with a gentle twist, the faint pop, a surprisingly loud sound in the silence. Then, without a word, she held the cool plastic bottle to Sarah's trembling lips. Sarah took a small, hesitant sip, the cool liquid, a welcome, almost miraculous shock to her parched, aching throat. The water was crisp, clean, washing away some of the bitter taste of humiliation. Maria then gently, meticulously, wiped the tears from Sarah's face with the soft towel, her touch feather-light, almost maternal. Her movements were careful, respectful, devoid of any attempt at conversation or forced comfort. She dabbed at the tear streaks on her cheeks, then around her swollen eyes, a silent, caring ministration. A wave of unexpected, overwhelming gratitude washed over Sarah, so potent it almost brought fresh tears. Here, in this sterile, forgotten space, this anonymous corner of a grand institution, a virtual stranger offered a kindness Arthur Sterling, with all his power and prestige, would never comprehend, would never be capable of. Maria offered no words, no empty platitudes, no explanations for the inexplicable, just quiet, steady, unwavering aid. As she stood, Maria slipped something small, cool, and rectangular, a business card, Sarah realized, into Sarah's trembling hand, her fingers brushing lightly against Sarah's clammy palm. A nod, a small, sad, knowing smile that spoke volumes, and then Maria was gone, as quietly as she had arrived, the door closing softly behind her, leaving Sarah once again in the stark, humming silence. The quiet hum of the fluorescent light, once a grating irritant, now felt like a desolate companion. Sarah gripped the card, its edges pressing into her palm, a physical anchor in the wake of Maria's silent, profound kindness. As her ragged breathing slowed, A different kind of clarity began to form in the sterile air, far removed from the public spectacle, a clarity that demanded action, even as, across the city, the architect of her downfall toasted his victory. Sarah sat there for a long moment, the card clutched tight in her hand, its smooth surface a small comfort. Her ragged breathing slowly normalized, evening out into a more steady rhythm. The insistent ringing in her ears began to subside, gradually replaced by the distant, familiar hum of the building's unseen machinery, a low, constant drone. Her eyes, still red-rimmed and swollen from the torrent of tears, focused on the stark white tiles of the floor, their geometric precision, a small grounding detail in her chaotic world. The cold clarity of the situation began to settle in, a sharp, unyielding truth. She had been publicly humiliated, stripped of her position, her carefully cultivated professional dignity. Her future, once so meticulously planned, so brightly envisioned, was now a gaping, terrifying void. But the persistent flutter in her belly, the soft, undeniable movement of her daughter, was a stubborn, fierce spark. A tiny, fierce protest against the encroaching darkness, a defiant beat against the silence. She would not beg. She would not cry again, not in front of them, not in public. This moment, this raw, exposed vulnerability, was a testament to Arthur's cruelty, his calculated malice, not to her inherent weakness. It was a reflection of his character, not hers. Slowly, deliberately, she lifted her chin, a small, decisive gesture of defiance, of nascent resolve. Her hands moved from their protective cradle around her belly, bracing against the cold, hard tile floor, pushing against the unforgiving surface. She would find a way. The office was a shrine to power, a stark contrast to the gala's chaotic performance. Here, the air was still and cold, smelling of old leather, expensive whiskey, and the dry, papery scent of archival documents. The only sound was the hushed whisper of the air conditioning and the distant, muted siren song of the city far below. A single desk lamp cast a warm, golden pool onto a vast mahogany desk, leaving the rest of the room in deep, expensive shadows. The city lights of Manhattan glittered through a floor-to-ceiling window, a silent, sprawling kingdom laid out for its master. Arthur Sterling shrugged off his suit jacket, tossing it onto a supple leather Chesterfield. He moved to the crystal decanter on his bar cart, the clink of the glass stopper, a sharp, satisfying sound in the quiet. Eleanor Vance, a slash of crimson against the room's dark wood and leather, followed him, her gold bangles chattering as she wrapped her arms around his waist from behind. "Did you see her face?" Eleanor's voice was a low, triumphant purr against his back. "The way it just crumbled. It was exquisite." Arthur poured 2 generous measures of amber liquid. "She built her own pyre. I just lit the match." He turned, handing her a glass, his eyes gleaming in the dim light. "Every great collection requires curation, Eleanor. Sometimes that means removing a piece that no longer fits the aesthetic." He took a long, slow swallow of his drink. Theatrics. It was all magnificent theatrics. I commanded that room. Every eye, every ear, every whisper was mine. She was nothing, a ghost before she even left the building. Eleanor's laugh was brittle. She ran a manicured red lacquered nail down the lapel of his shirt. "A smudge on the canvas, I think you said. Poetic. You were a god tonight." Her praise was a drug. He felt it surge through him, warm and potent as the whiskey. He set his glass down on the gleaming mahogany. Tonight was merely the overture. He gestured for her to sit in one of the leather armchairs opposite his desk. He walked around, reclaiming his throne, and opened a slim, leather-bound portfolio. The soft click of its clasp was unnervingly loud. Inside lay the architecture of a man's victory. He spread the documents across the desk, a clinical, organized display of devastation. "These," he said, tapping a thick sheaf of papers, "are the divorce filings for me and Cynthia. They will be filed at 9 o'clock in the morning tomorrow. Her lawyers will be served by 10 o'clock in the morning." Eleanor leaned forward, the gold at her neck catching the light. "This," he continued, sliding a second folder across the desk, "is the final transfer confirmation. 80% of my liquid assets, including my share of the Whitman's private endowment fund, were moved to a new holding corporation in Grand Cayman 3 weeks ago." He smiled, a thin, predatory expression. "A corporation of which Cynthia knows nothing and to which my name is not attached." A third file. "And this is the most beautiful part." His voice dropped, filled with a connoisseur's appreciation for his own cruelty. "Revised provenance reports for the last 5 acquisitions, with strategic gaps and errors that point directly to Sarah's access codes. When the auditors come sniffing, and they will, after Mr. Abernathy's little fit, they won't find a Port Authority mistake. They will find a pattern of gross negligence. Enough to trigger a morals clause in her contract and justify the termination for cause." He paused, letting her absorb the sheer, brutal efficiency of it all. "There will be no severance, no lawsuit. She will be a pariah. No other reputable institution in this hemisphere will touch her." Eleanor's eyes glittered. She was impressed, she was aroused, but she was not satisfied. "And us?" The question shifted the energy in the room. The air grew colder. "What about us, Eleanor? This is all very neat for you, Arthur. You shed a wife, you neuter, a liability." She leaned back, crossing her legs, the red silk of her dress hissing. Her bangles clanked as she gestured around the opulent office. "Where do I fit in this new corporation, in this new life? I need more than a front row seat to your brilliance. I want a stake in it." He stared at her. The adoration was gone, replaced by the hard gleam of negotiation. "Marriage, Arthur, a date. And I want 10% of the holding company, in writing." He laughed, but the sound was short and sharp, not born of humor but of disbelief. "You want 10%? I am the mother of your next chapter, your new legacy." Her voice was steel wrapped in velvet. "Sarah was a dalliance, an employee. Cynthia is the past. I am the future. Prove it." A muscle worked in his jaw. He looked away from her, towards the glittering cityscape beyond the glass, his mind replaying the scene at the gala. Sarah's stricken face, the hand on her belly. A flicker of something, annoyance perhaps, at the untidiness of it all, crossed his face. He'd built an empire of beautiful, controllable things. People were so much more complicated. They had attachments. They had messy, biological demands. She was just the frame, never the art. The words hung in the air, cold and absolute, a final, contemptuous dismissal of her very being. He believed he had neatly excised her, leaving no trace. But as the echo of his cruel words settled, Eleanor's voice, laced with an unexpected tremor, cut through the triumphant silence, introducing a new, messy complication into his carefully curated future. She let the silence stretch, then played her final card. Her hand went to her own flat stomach, a conscious mimicry of the gesture she'd seen Sarah make countless times. "Arthur," her voice was a soft, deliberate tremor, "I'm pregnant." The twist, the perfect, unexpected move. He froze. The arrogance, the irritation, all of it vanished, replaced by a sudden, sharp intake of breath. He stared at her, then at her hand, his mind racing. A new legacy, an heir, his heir, his heir. A child untainted by his past, born of his triumph. The messy, inconvenient pregnancy of Sarah Jenkins was an embarrassment. This, however, this was a continuation. This was a dynasty. A slow smile spread across his face, genuine this time, transforming his features. It was the look of a man who believed the universe had just bent to his will. He stood, walked around the desk, and pulled Eleanor to her feet, his hands on her waist. "A son," he whispered, his voice thick with sudden possessive pride. "It will be a son." He released her abruptly and strode to the phone on his desk, his movements now charged with manic energy. He snatched the receiver and punched a single speed dial button. He waited, his back to Eleanor, staring out at his glittering kingdom. "Thorne," he barked into the phone, "it's me. Set it in motion." He paused, listening. Yes, all of it. The divorce, the audit triggers, everything. No delays, no hesitation. He hung up without saying goodbye, the click of the receiver final and absolute. The machine was now in motion. There was no going back. The city slept, unaware of the engines of destruction Arthur had set in motion, engines that would grind through the night and into the stark, unforgiving light of dawn. As the first rays of morning pierced through the urban landscape, they found Sarah, not triumphant, but adrift in the sudden, terrifying wake of his calculated demolition. The harsh light of morning clawed at Sarah's eyes through the blinds. A dull ache throbbed behind her temples, a physical echo of the emotional devastation from the night before. The silk sheets cool against her skin offered little comfort. Her apartment, once a sanctuary of soft whites and creams, now felt hollow, an expensive shell. The scent of her chamomile tea, brewed precisely as she liked it, seemed thin and unsatisfying. The city outside, already a cacophony of distant sirens and honking cabs, promised another relentless day. She moved with a quiet precision, muscle memory guiding her through her morning ritual. A warm shower, the steam, a temporary balm against the chill that had settled deep within her bones. The familiar scent of her lavender soap. She dressed in a simple cream linen dress, practical and understated, an armor against the world. She reached for her phone, its cool glass slick beneath her fingers. A quick glance at the screen confirmed her worst fears. The news had spread like wildfire. Headlines screamed her name, accusations of gross negligence, financial misconduct. Arthur had moved fast. Her first attempt at normalcy was mundane. She tried to order a car service. The app declined her card. She tried another, declined. Again, a cold knot tightened in her stomach. Her main debit card also declined. Panic, a sharp, unbidden guest, pierced through her carefully constructed calm. She needed cash. Her car was gone, she realized. It had always been parked in the building's secure garage. A quick call to the valet confirmed it. "Mr. Sterling had it towed, ma'am. Instructions from his attorneys." The words were delivered with a practiced neutrality that chilled her to the core, stripped, bit by bit. Meanwhile, high above the city, in a glass-walled conference room that overlooked Central Park, Arthur Sterling surveyed his domain. The room smelled of fresh-brewed Colombian coffee, the rich aroma mingling with the crisp, almost sterile scent of new legal documents. Sunlight, sharp and unwavering, glinted off the polished mahogany table and the array of silver pens. He wore a dark, impeccably tailored suit, the fabric a subtle barrier against the world's untidiness. Eleanor Vance sat opposite him, a vibrant splash of crimson against the muted tones of the room. Her gold bangles clinked softly as she shifted, a rhythmic punctuation to the low murmurs of the three dark-suited lawyers flanking Arthur. The prenuptial agreement is ironclad. One lawyer, a thin man with rimless glasses, stated, his voice dry as parchment. Mrs. Jenkins's access to all joint accounts and assets has been frozen. Her personal accounts, including the discretionary fund, are also under immediate review and suspension, per the terms of the termination clause. Arthur steepled his fingers, a faint smile playing on his lips. Excellent. No stone unturned. He glanced at Eleanor, who met his gaze, a predatory glint in her eyes. Ensure all her credit lines are canceled, her access to the museum's private collections revoked, even her personal membership. I want no trace of her remaining. Another lawyer, a formidable woman with a sharp bob, adjusted her glasses. The divorce petition has been filed. Service will be executed this afternoon. We've arranged for a process server to intercept her at the museum, where she'll likely attempt to collect personal effects. At the museum? Arthur mused, a slow, deliberate relish in his tone. Perfect! A fitting farewell. He leaned back, the leather of his chair sighing softly. Let her feel the weight of what she has lost. Let her understand the true cost of her indiscretion. He paused, his gaze sweeping over the cityscape, a vast canvas for his ambition. Her professional life, her financial stability, her very sense of belonging, all erased, a clean slate for me. Eleanor's bangles clattered as she reached across the table, her red nails tapping lightly on a document. And the museum's PR statement, the one about her unforeseen departure. Due to serious administrative oversights? Released this morning, the first lawyer confirmed. It maintains a professional distance while subtly reinforcing the narrative. The public will connect the dots. Arthur nodded. The narrative is everything. He stood, drawing the attention of everyone in the room. The Whitman Museum of Art thrives on its reputation. It demands excellence. It demands loyalty. Those who fail to uphold its standards, those who threaten its integrity, must be removed, swiftly, decisively. He paused, looking directly at Eleanor. Any questions? The silence in the room was absolute. She shook her head, a crimson smile on her lips. She understood. Back in her apartment, a cold dread had begun to set in. Sarah tried to call her bank, but was rerouted through an automated maze. Then, a sharp, persistent knocking at her door. She hesitated, her hand instinctively going to her belly. Amelia stirred, a gentle, reassuring flutter. She took a breath, chin up. It could be Maria. It could be a mistake. She opened the door. Two men in dark suits stood on her threshold, grim-faced. One held a thick envelope. Sarah Jenkins? Yes. Her voice was steady, betraying none of the turmoil inside. You've been served. The thick legal documents felt heavy in her hands, a literal weight. Divorce papers, custody petitions, restraining orders. The language was cold, brutal, dissecting her life into sterile paragraphs of legal jargon. Her apartment, her possessions, her future, all suddenly subject to Arthur's will. She knew she needed to go to the museum. She had to gather her personal items, her research notes, a small framed photograph of her and her uncle beaming at the museum's opening gala years ago, a time when everything had felt so full of promise she couldn't abandon it. The thought of losing that last tangible connection, of letting Arthur erase every trace of her existence there, spurred her forward. She hailed a taxi, a battered yellow cab that smelled faintly of stale coffee and damp upholstery. The ride through the familiar streets felt alien, the city a blur of indifferent faces. She stared out the window, her mind racing, 1,000 fragmented thoughts colliding like shards of glass. What had she missed? How could she have been so blind? The Whitman Museum of Art loomed, a grand, imposing edifice of marble and glass. Usually, its sight filled her with pride, with a sense of purpose. Today, it felt like a tomb. The heavy oak doors, always welcoming, seemed to sneer. The familiar scent of polished wood and old money, usually a comfort, now felt oppressive, suffocating. She pushed through the revolving doors, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. The marble lobby, usually bustling, was strangely quiet. A few hushed whispers, heads turning. Sarah felt every eye on her, 1,000 invisible needles pricking her skin. She kept her chin high. As she approached the security desk, a guard, usually friendly, averted his gaze. "Ms. Jenkins, I'm afraid your access card has been deactivated." His voice was low, laced with a practiced regret. "Deactivated?" Her voice was a bare whisper. "I need to get to my office." "I have strict instructions, ma'am." He looked away. "You're not permitted on the premises." A wave of nausea washed over her. Not permitted. After a decade, after giving her life to this place, this was her home. Then a voice, smooth, cutting, familiar. "Well, well, look what the cat dragged in." Arthur Sterling stood at the top of the grand staircase. Eleanor Vance, a flash of red at his side, her gold jewelry catching the light. He was in his dark suit, a king on his throne. "Arthur," Sarah's voice was firm, "I need to retrieve my belongings." He descended the stairs slowly, deliberately, each step a pronouncement. Eleanor followed, a scarlet shadow. The sound of her bangles was sharp in the silent lobby. "Belongings?" Arthur scoffed, a cruel smile twisting his lips. "You have no belongings here, Sarah. You have nothing." He paused just a few feet from her, close enough for her to catch the faint scent of his expensive cologne, now tainted with malice. "Your office has been cleared. Your personal effects are being shipped to a storage unit, paid for, naturally, for the first month. After that, they're yours to dispose of, or not." He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a low, venomous hiss meant only for her ears. "You were a mistake, an administrative oversight, a minor inconvenience quickly rectified. You were always disposable." His eyes flickered down to her belly, a brief, dismissive glance that sent a cold shock through her. "Just like everything else you touch." A fleeting, meaningless presence. Sarah's breath hitched. She refused to scream. She pressed her hand to her belly, a silent prayer, a fierce protection. Amelia. This was for Amelia. You think you can erase me? Her voice was a steel thread. You think this changes who I am? Arthur laughed, a short, sharp sound devoid of humor. It changes everything, Sarah. You are a pariah, a failed curator, a woman who lost everything because she couldn't even manage her own life, let alone an institution. He gestured around the vast, empty lobby. This museum, this city, this world. It has no place for you anymore. Eleanor stepped forward, her voice a syrupy, sweet poison. Such a pity, dear. All that potential, wasted. Sarah's gaze locked with Arthur's. Her chin came up, a small, defiant lift. You can take my job, you can take my home, but you cannot take my integrity. The memory surfaced. True value isn't found in objects, but in the integrity that protects them. A silent voice echoed within her, a defiant shield. Arthur merely smiled, a slow, predatory baring of teeth. Integrity, Sarah? A charming word, and worthless. It pays no bills, it buys no loyalty, it doesn't secure your future. He leaned in, his voice a whisper. You have nothing, nothing but that burden. The word burden echoed, a final, brutal blow that left Sarah reeling, her breath stolen. The world outside, the indifferent city she now navigated, suddenly blurred into a chaotic, painful symphony. The city bled into a smear of indistinct light and shadow. Sarah's hand, still clutching the sheaf of legal papers, was numb. A sharp, searing pain shot through her lower back. It radiated forward, a vicious band tightening around her belly. She gasped. The taxi driver glanced in the rearview mirror, his face a mask of weary concern. You okay back there, lady? Another wave hit. Stronger, she cried out, a sound stolen from her throat. Her hand flew to her belly, a frantic, protective shield. Amelia! It was too soon. Far too soon. Her vision tunneled, the edges darkening. The indifferent city, the cold legal papers, the phantom of Arthur's voice, it all dissolved into a singular, blinding point of pain. Hospital, she managed to gasp, the word tearing from her lips. Get me to a hospital. The world became a series of sharp, jarring fragments, the screech of tires, the wail of a distant siren that grew closer, becoming her own, the rough texture of a stranger's jacket against her cheek, the metallic taste of fear in her mouth. Then the cold, a sterile, numbing cold seeped into her bones. The air, a sterile chill, smelled of antiseptic and bleach, a clean, sharp scent designed to erase all traces of human suffering. It did not work. The low, rhythmic beeping of a machine was a constant, electronic heartbeat next to her own frantic pulse. She was in a room of whites and pale grays, the sheets on the bed stiff and unforgiving against her skin. A doctor, a woman with kind eyes and a tired face, stood over her. Sarah! The doctor's voice was calm, a stark contrast to the storm inside Sarah's body. You're at Lenox Hill. You're experiencing a placental abruption, likely brought on by acute stress. We need to do an emergency C-section. Your daughter is in distress. The words were clinical, the reality a torrent of ice water. Distress. Amelia was in distress. Sarah's chin came up. A decision. Do it. We need to contact the baby's father, a nurse said gently, holding a tablet. A signature is required for the emergency authorization. Sarah's throat felt tight. Arthur Sterling! Oh! The call found Arthur Sterling at a corner table at Per Se. The restaurant was a hushed cathedral of gastronomy overlooking the glittering expanse of Central Park. The air smelled of white truffles, beeswax, and money. He was closing a deal not for art, but for a new penthouse, a monument to his new life. Eleanor, a vision in a scarlet silk dress, sat beside him, her diamond earrings catching the low light, her bangles a soft, celebratory music. His phone buzzed, a vulgar intrusion. He glanced at the number. Lenox Hill. Annoyance flickered across his face. He excused himself, stepping onto a small private balcony. The night air was cool against his face. "Sterling," a tinny, urgent voice explained the situation. "Emergency. Placental abruption. C-section. Daughter." The words were clinical, stripped of emotion, yet they landed like small, sharp stones. He looked out at the endless river of headlights flowing around the park. His own father had been a ghost, a name on a letterhead. He saw, for a flicker of a second, a small child in a sterile room, waiting for a door to open. The feeling was a shard of glass in his gut, and he plucked it out. "I'm in a meeting," Arthur said, his voice flat and cold. "It cannot be rescheduled. I am not her next of kin. She signed divorce papers this morning. Do what you have to do." He ended the call. He would not be drawn back into her chaos, her mess. He walked back inside. The deal, the wine, the new life awaiting him. He was the curator of his own existence now. She was a piece from a previous collection, archived and forgotten. Arthur had expertly archived and forgotten her, a discarded artifact in his curated life. But the narrative of her suffering was far from over, and in the antiseptic halls of Lenox Hill, a new act of cruelty was about to unfold. A calculated performance from a woman who knew precisely how to twist the knife. The nurse returned, her expression a careful blank. "He's unavailable." Unavailable. A final, brutal severance. Sarah closed her eyes. Of course he was. She was alone. She had always been alone in this. She was a pariah, a failed curator, a woman who lost everything. The thought sent another spasm of pain, sharper this time, through her body. Then, a sound in the doorway, a familiar, musical clinking of gold. Eleanor Vance stood there. Her crimson dress was an open wound against the sterile white of the hospital room. She held a bouquet of exotic, blood-red flowers. Her smile was a masterpiece of feigned concern. "Sarah," she breathed, her voice a silken caress. "I came as soon as I heard. Arthur is just devastated. He can't be here. He's closing on our new home, a penthouse. The views are simply commanding." Eleanor drifted into the room, the scent of her strong perfume, a cloying gardenia, fighting and losing against the antiseptic smell. She placed the funereal flowers on the small bedside table. "He felt it was important someone was here for you," she continued, her eyes sweeping over Sarah's pale face, the IV drip, the taut mound of her belly beneath the thin hospital blanket. It was a victory lap, a final inspection of the vanquished. To show support, he feels so responsible in a way. He worries about you and the situation. Sarah said nothing. She simply watched Eleanor, a predator circling. "It's a shame, really," Eleanor mused, adjusting a bangle. "This was all so messy. Arthur prefers things to be clean, elegant. He's building a new legacy now, a real one." She paused, her hand drifting for a moment to her own flat stomach. "A son. He is certain it will be a son, an heir for the Sterling name." The cruelty, so pure, so refined, was almost art. Her strength began to ebb, drowning. The monitor grew faster, a frantic bird in her ear. Despair swirled. He wanted to erase her. He had said as much, and in that moment of absolute surrender, his voice returned to her, a phantom echo from the museum gala, clear and cutting as shattered glass. The memory surfaced. She was just the frame, never the art. The memory was a shock of cold water. It did not break her. It woke her up. The frame. He thought she was just the decorative edge, the disposable border for his life's masterpiece. He was wrong. The frame is what holds it all together. The frame protects the art from the world. A new resolve hardened within her. Her chin lifted from the pillow. Her eyes, clear and fierce, met Eleanor's. "Get out!" The voice was not hers. It was deeper, stronger. Eleanor blinked, taken aback. "I was only trying to—" "You are not welcome here." Sarah's gaze was unwavering. "This room is for my daughter. It is not for you." A nurse bustled in, sensing the shift. "It's time, Ms. Jenkins." Eleanor was swept aside as a gurney appeared. As they wheeled Sarah out, past the gloating mistress in her red dress, Sarah placed a hand on her belly. This was not an act of fear. It was a promise. The operating room was blindingly bright and freezing cold. It carried the sharp, metallic scent of ozone and sterile cleanliness. A world of polished steel, blue scrubs, and masked faces. The beeping was a steady chorus now. A green curtain blocked her view, a final barrier between her and her daughter. She felt a pulling, a strange, internal pressure. There was no pain, only the bizarre sensation of being rearranged. She focused on the reflection of the surgical light, a distant, blurry star. She breathed, in, out, for Amelia. Then, a change in the room's atmosphere, a shared, held breath among the surgeons, a gurgling, liquid sound. And then, a cry. It was not a sweet sound. It was a raw, furious, sputtering noise, the sound of lungs fighting for their first taste of air. A thin, piercing wail that sliced through the clinical hum of the machines, a declaration of life. It was the most beautiful sound Sarah had ever heard. Oh, and Yuzo, the room smelled suddenly of salt and iron and birth. Tears streamed down Sarah's temples, disappearing into her hairline. "She's beautiful, Sarah." The doctor's voice was warm, smiling from behind her mask. "A little small, but she's a fighter." A few moments later, a nurse brought a small bundle wrapped in a soft white blanket. She placed the warm, startling weight in the crook of Sarah's arm. Sarah looked down. A tiny, perfect face, red and wrinkled. A dusting of dark hair, eyes squeezed shut against the new, bright world. Amelia. All the noise, all the pain, all the betrayal receded to a distant shore. There was only this new, solid, breathing reality in her arms, her daughter, her integrity, her art. She holds her daughter close. The faint hum of hospital machinery was a lullaby in the quiet room. Amelia, swaddled in a miniature white blanket, slept peacefully in the clear bassinet beside Sarah's bed. Her tiny chest rose and fell, a steady, precious rhythm. Sarah traced the delicate curve of her daughter's cheek with a trembling finger, her heart a fragile thing caught between fierce love and an ocean of fear. The room was bathed in the soft glow of a nightlight, casting long, shifting shadows. The air, thin with antiseptic, offered no comfort. Sarah's skin felt dry, taut from the lingering fear and the exhaustion that pressed down on her like a stone. Hours had passed since Amelia's arrival, each minute stretched, a testament to survival. The nurses, efficient and kind, had come and gone, their whispers soft against the silence. They had given her a small cup of weak tea, bland and tasteless. She had not touched it. Hunger was a distant concept. Sleep, a luxury she couldn't afford. Her eyes scanned the room, lingering on the small, framed picture she had insisted on having placed on the bedside table. Her uncle, his arm around her, both smiling wide, standing in front of a newly acquired piece for the museum. He had been her anchor, her confidant. The man who had shaped her career, fueled her passion. Now he was gone, and the institution he loved, the one she had dedicated her life to, had turned on her. The legal papers lay folded on the pristine white sheets, a stark reminder, a constant ache, Arthur's cruelty, Eleanor's venom. The word burden echoed in the silence, a cold, sharp stab. He meant Amelia. He meant her. Her gaze returned to her daughter. Amelia, not a burden, never a burden. She was everything, a new beginning, a reason to fight, a reason to live. Sarah knew she needed to make a call, one call, the one she had resisted for days, for weeks, ever since the first whisper of trouble. It was a call that meant admitting defeat, admitting the depth of her fall, a call to her past, to the person who had warned her gently years ago about the art world's sharp edges, her mother. Her phone, a slim black rectangle, felt heavy in her hand. The screen glowed, a harsh beacon in the dim room. She scrolled through her contacts, past Arthur's name, past Eleanor's, past so many faces that now felt like strangers. Her thumb hovered over a name, Mama. A deep breath, a shaky exhale. She pressed the call button. The dial tone buzzed, a lonely sound in the stillness. Each ring was a tiny hammer against her temples. 1, 2, 3. She almost hung up. Then a click. Sarah? Child, is that you? Her mother's voice, strong, familiar, a lifetime of warmth and worry woven into its timbre. It was a sound that threatened to unravel the fragile composure Sarah had built. Mama, she whispered, her voice raw, catching in her throat. She gripped the phone, her knuckles white. A pause on the other end, a breath held. What's wrong, baby? Your voice. You sound so tired. I had the baby, Mama. Another silence, longer this time. Sarah could hear the distant clink of dishes, the faint murmur of a television, the comforting sounds of a life 1,000 miles away. A life she had left behind for the glittering promise of New York. The baby? Her mother's voice was softer now, tinged with disbelief, then something else. So early? Oh, Sarah, is she all right? She's beautiful. Her name is Amelia. Sarah could feel the tears pricking at her eyes, a familiar burning. She pressed a hand to her belly, a ghost of the protective gesture. Amelia, that's a strong name, like your grandmother. Is she healthy? Small, but a fighter. The words came out in broken pieces, each one costing her. She's in the clear. I am too. Thank God. The relief in her mother's voice was palpable. Then, the inevitable question. Why didn't you call sooner? Why didn't Arthur call me? Sarah closed her eyes. The question hung in the air, heavy and inescapable. This was the moment, the admission, the shattering of the carefully constructed facade. Arthur, he's not here, Mama." "Not there? Where is he, Sarah? This is your first child, his child." Her mother's voice sharpened, concern quickly turning to a familiar, simmering anger. "He better have a good explanation." "He filed for divorce," Sarah said, the words a hammer blow. "He fired me, took everything." Silence again, a deep, unsettling quiet that felt colder than the antiseptic air. The small sounds from her mother's home had vanished. Sarah imagined her mother, perfectly still, her hand going to her own chest, the way she always did when she was hurt. "Everything?" Her mother's voice was barely a whisper. "The museum? Your job? Your home?" "Yes," a single devastating word. "And he just left you? Alone? After all you gave to him? To that place?" The whisper rose, tinged with a bitterness Sarah had heard before, a taste of old wounds. That man, just like his father. Sarah flinched. She didn't want this. The judgment, the reminders. She wanted comfort, a soft place to land. But her mother was a realist, always. "I have Amelia, Mama." Sarah's chin came up, her resolve fragile but present. Bless her heart. She didn't ask for any of this. She deserves better than this, Sarah. We all do. Her mother's voice was low, filled with a sadness that felt deeper than Sarah's own. "You were so proud of that museum, said it was your life's work, said your uncle would be so proud." "He was," Sarah managed, a fresh wave of grief washing over her. "He would be heartbroken by what Arthur has done." The silence on the line was different now, not just shock, but something else, a knowing. "Child," her mother said, her voice weighted with a hidden history. "Your uncle, he loved you, and he loved that museum far more than any of us ever knew." Sarah frowned, a prickle of unease. "What do you mean, Mama?" "He believed in its mission. He collected for it." Her uncle owned this museum. Her mother's words were slow, deliberate, each one falling like a heavy stone, given in trust, under the condition of anonymity. The air left Sarah's lungs in a silent whoosh. The words hung in the quiet room, shimmering, surreal. Her uncle, not just a generous patron, the architect, the founder, the true owner. A twist, her own museum. "Mama," Sarah breathed, the word a fragile question. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying," her mother's voice now held a fierce, quiet steel, "that Arthur Sterling has no right, no claim, none." The revelation hit Sarah like a physical blow. The years of dedication, the accusations, the public humiliation, the stripping of her life, her job, her child's father, all built on a foundation of a secret her own family had kept, a secret that Arthur had exploited. Her hand went to Amelia, sleeping soundly beside her. This wasn't just about her anymore. This was about Amelia's legacy, her inheritance. The weight of the revelation settled. "Why?" Sarah asked, her voice cracking, barely audible. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Your uncle wanted you to earn your way, to make your own mark. He wanted you to love it for its own sake, not because it was ours." Her mother's voice was thick with regret. "He thought it would protect you from people like Arthur." A bitter laugh escaped Sarah's lips. Protect. It had done the opposite. It had made her vulnerable, a pawn. "He wanted you to find true value, Sarah. True value isn't found in objects, but in the integrity that protects them." Sarah's mind reeled. Integrity, the word Arthur had dismissed, the word she had clung to. "Mama," Sarah said, a new strength entering her voice, her chin lifted. "I need to know everything." "I'll call your Uncle Reginald," her mother replied, her tone firm. "He has the papers. He always did. He'll know what to do." Uncle Reginald, the protector, the man who had stood in the shadows, waiting. The conversation ended with a click. Sarah lowered the phone, her hand still trembling, but not from fear, from a simmering rage. The hospital room suddenly felt smaller, the antiseptic smell sharper. Amelia stirred, a soft whimper, then settled back into sleep. Sarah looked at her daughter, a silent vow passing between them. "This changes everything." A faint sound from the corridor. Footsteps, slow, deliberate. They paused outside her door. The soft, metallic click of the door handle. The final click of the phone echoed in the small room, leaving behind not emptiness, but a roaring surge of revelation and burgeoning fury. Sarah clutched the receiver. Her world irrevocably shifted, even as, just beyond her door, the physical embodiment of that newfound truth was already making his slow, deliberate approach. The door clicked open, a sound too soft for the gravity it carried, lost beneath the low hum of the neonatal monitors and the whisper of the ventilation system. The air in the room, a stale mix of antiseptic and old coffee, seemed to hold its breath. It was not Arthur. The man who entered filled the doorway, his presence absorbing the weak, sallow hospital light. He was tall, north of 60, with a cascade of silver tracing the temples of his neatly trimmed dark hair. The lines on his face were etched, not by worry, but by time and quiet authority. He wore a dark wool overcoat, exquisitely tailored, that smelled of the cold night air, of cedar, and of something less tangible, the clean, crisp scent of old money. His shoes, polished but sturdy, made no sound on the sterile linoleum floor. He was a figure of quiet, immense substance. Beneath the coat, a simple charcoal suit, a classic statement that whispered where Arthur shouted. His eyes, dark and intelligent, swept the room and found Sarah's first. He offered a slow, deliberate nod. It was a gesture that communicated 1,000 things at once. "I am here." Acknowledgement. "I know." Support. "I am sorry it came to this." Regret. Behind him, a woman in a severe gray pantsuit slipped into the room, a shadow of pure efficiency. She carried a slim leather portfolio and a laptop, moving with a noiseless purpose that suggested she was invisible by choice. She sat up at the small visitor's table by the window, her back to the drama, her focus immediate and absolute. She did not look at anyone. She simply opened her laptop, the soft chime of its startup, the only sound she made, an electronic punctuation mark in the heavy silence. The man walked to Sarah's bedside. His gaze flickered to the bassinet, to the tiny, sleeping form of Amelia, swaddled in white flannel, her chest rising and falling in a steady, miraculous rhythm. A subtle softening in his expression, a momentary flicker of warmth, chased the sternness from his eyes before the mask of calm resolve settled again. "Sarah!" His voice was a low baritone, a resonant hum that seemed to settle the frantic, buzzing energy in the room, smoothing the jagged edges of her fear. "Uncle Reginald," she breathed, the name a prayer and a sob of relief she barely managed to choke back. Tears pricked at the corners of her eyes, hot and sudden. "Your mother called." He did not offer platitudes or apologies for his absence. He stated a fact. His hand rested briefly on her arm, not a comforting pat, but a firm, steadying weight, solid, real. "I came," he gestured with his chin toward the woman at the laptop. "My associate, Ms. Albright. We've made some arrangements." Sarah's hand instinctively went to the thin blanket covering her, her fingers tracing the worn cotton. "He's on his way," she whispered, her voice rough. "He thinks he's coming to finalize the severance. His lawyers sent new papers. They're trying to say I violated my contract." "He is coming to a finalization," Reginald agreed, his voice devoid of irony, a flat statement of fact. "Just not the one he expects." A stillness settled. The only sounds were the faint, rhythmic beeping of the neonatal monitors, the whisper-quiet, impossibly fast tapping of Mrs. Aging, Albright's fingers on her keyboard, and the steady, precious rhythm of Amelia's breathing. It was a fragile peace, a deep breath before the plunge. The quiet was shattered by the arrival of Arthur Sterling. The door swung open, hitting the rubber stopper on the wall with a percussive thud. He strode into the room without knocking, a conquering general returning to a pacified territory. His suit was a stark, expensive black, tailored to project power. At his side, a half step behind, was Eleanor Vance, a slash of crimson silk against the room's pale neutrality. Her gold bangles clattered, a jarring, discordant music that grated on the nerves. She carried a leather document folder like a shield. Arthur's heavy, spicy cologne mingled with Eleanor's sharp floral perfume, an olfactory assault that warred with the room's sterile air. Arthur's eye swept the room, registering Reginald with a flicker of annoyance, a stranger cluttering his stage. He dismissed him instantly. His focus landed on Sarah, propped against the pillows, her face pale, but her eyes dangerously clear. He smiled, a thin, predatory curve of his lips that did not reach his eyes. "Sarah, I see you're recovering. Good." He paced before her bed, his expensive shoes squeaking slightly on the polished floor, owning the small space. "I prefer to deal with matters when all parties are lucid. It prevents any messy claims of emotional distress later. It's cleaner." He stopped and gestured magnanimously. "I've brought the revised agreement. A formality, really. It's a generous offer, considering the circumstances. Far more than you are entitled to after the damage your incompetence has caused. The Whitman. The scandal could have sunk us. My swift action is the only reason the board is holding firm. But I am, if nothing else, a man who appreciates a tidy ending." Eleanor stepped forward, placing the folder on the foot of Sarah's bed with a soft thud. Her red dress seemed to suck the very air from the room. "Arthur wanted to be sure you were provided for," she said, her voice a confection of false sympathy. "He's a good man." Arthur laughed, a short, sharp bark that held no humor. "Goodness has nothing to do with it. It's about reputation, mine, the museum's. A clean break is essential for the narrative we are building. The new Sterling Wing. The acquisitions I am personally curating. I am in talks with the Guggenheim for the rotating collection. It all requires a foundation of strength. No lingering weaknesses. No attachments to a failed past." He finally turned his full attention to the silent man by the bed, looking him up and down with open contempt. "And you are?" he asked, his tone dripping with dismissal. "Her lawyer? I assure you, my legal team has reviewed this. It is ironclad." Reginald did not answer. He simply looked toward Miss Albright. She nodded once, her eyes fixed on her screen, and picked up her phone. She dialed the number with practiced speed. Arthur's phone buzzed in his pocket. He ignored it, turning back to Sarah. "As I was saying," Arthur continued, his monologue regaining its rhythm, "the future of the Whitman is my singular focus. It is my legacy. I have given my life to it, molded it, elevated it from a dusty collection of sentimental pieces into a global powerhouse. I am the art and the artist." His phone buzzed again, insistently, an angry, persistent vibration against his thigh. With a sigh of theatrical frustration, he pulled it out as if swatting a gnat. He glanced at the screen. "A major bank's corporate line." His expression tightened into a mask of irritation. He answered, his voice sharp. "Mr. Sterling!" A calm, professional voice emanated from the phone's speaker, seamlessly amplified by Ms. Albright's device and filling the small room. "Oh!" "Mr. Sterling, this is Julian Crest at the bank's Advisory Risk Division. We are calling to inform you that, effective immediately per Section B of your credit agreements, we are calling in all outstanding institutional and personal loans." Arthur froze, the phone held to his ear. The color began to drain from his face, leaving a sickly gray pallor under his expensive tan. "What? That's impossible! On what grounds?" "The grounds of material misrepresentation of foundational assets," the voice replied, cool and detached as a surgeon's scalpel. "The primary collateral against which the Whitman Museum's credit lines were extended appears to not be an asset of the museum at all. It is held in a private, irrevocable trust. Therefore, all loans secured against that collateral are now due, in full, immediately." Arthur's face went slack. His knuckles were white where he gripped the phone, his knuckles stark against his ashen skin. He stared at it as if it were a snake. "This is a mistake, a ridiculous error." "Who authorized this?" Ms. Albright ended the call, plunging the room into a silence that was a crushing weight. Arthur's head snapped up, his wild eyes locking onto Reginald. "You!" he rasped, his voice suddenly raw. "Who the hell are you?" Reginald's gaze moved from Arthur's crumbling composure to Sarah's wide, watching eyes, then to the sleeping infant in the bassinet. Amelia slept through it all, a small, perfect anchor in the storm. His voice, when he finally spoke, was calm, measured, and carried the unstoppable force of an avalanche. A cold wave of realization washed over the room. "My brother, Robert Jenkins, founded your museum." He paused, letting the name hang in the air. "I am Reginald Vance. I execute his estate." The words landed, not with a bang, but with the silent, total devastation of a collapsing star. Eleanor's hand, which had been reaching to jangle a bracelet, stopped midair, frozen. Her crimson dress, a moment ago a statement of power, now looked cheap, gaudy. Costume for a play that had just been canceled, the tableau held, stark and unnerving. Arthur stared, his mind visibly struggling, refusing to connect the pieces. Jenkins! Vance! The name on the trust documents he had never been allowed to see, the anonymous benefactor. The source of it all, a strangled, guttural sound escaped his throat. It might have been a laugh or a sob. "You're lying! This is a trick, a pathetic, desperate little game." He jabbed a trembling finger at Sarah. "She put you up to this, paying you for this little performance, are you?" "Vance Jenkins Trust was established in 1988, Reginald said, his voice cutting through Arthur's frantic accusations like a blade of ice. The primary codicil, which you were never privy to, is the integrity clause. It grants the executor, myself, the power to reclaim all assets and dissolve the museum's administrative board in the event of gross mismanagement or actions that bring moral disrepute upon the institution or the Vance family name. He took a step closer, and Arthur instinctively took a step back, bumping into the foot of the bed. My brother founded the Whitman to share beauty, not to be a monument to one man's ego. You fired my brother's only heir. You publicly humiliated her to cover your own dalliances. You abandoned her during the birth of his grand niece. Reginald's voice dropped, becoming even quieter yet heavier. You, Arthur, are the gross mismanagement. You are the moral disrepute. You can't prove any of this, Arthur snarled, but the panic was a wild animal in his eyes. He was cornered and he knew it. I don't have to, Reginald said softly. I am the proof, and the collection, the endowment, the very land the Whitman stands on, it reverts to the trust, to its heir. He glanced at Sarah, his meaning clear as glass. As of 10 minutes ago, Arthur, you are the director of a beautiful empty building with no art, no money, and no credit. You are a curator with nothing to curate. A final twist, a knife. Arthur stood in the center of the sterile room. His shoulders, which he always held squared and proud, seemed to cave inward. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. The monologue was over. The stage had been pulled out from under him. The expensive suit hung on him now, a costume 2 sizes too large for the diminished man inside. Eleanor stared at him, her face a mask of horrified calculation. She took a small, almost imperceptible step away from him, breaking their physical alliance. She was tethered to a falling man, and she was already reaching for the scissors. He was a guest here. The grand atrium of the Whitman Museum of Art was a cold cathedral of silence. The soaring marble walls, usually echoing with the hushed footsteps of patrons, now seemed to absorb all sound, creating a vacuum of tense expectation. The air, chilled by an aggressive climate control system, smelled of Windex and the faint, dusty scent of old grievances. Through the immense floor-to-ceiling windows, the lights of New York City glittered, a distant, indifferent audience. At the center of the cavernous space, a long, black marble table was arranged for an execution. The board of directors sat on one side, their faces grim, a tableau of expensive suits and troubled expressions. At the head of the table, Arthur Sterling sat not in a chair of power, but in a defendant's dock of his own making. His dark suit was immaculate, but it hung on a frame that had collapsed inward. His skin had a gray, papery texture under the gallery's track lighting. He stared at the polished black surface of the table, a king surveying a conquered territory that was no longer his. Beside him, Eleanor Vance was a wound in the monochrome palette. Her dress, a vibrant, defiant red, seemed to buzz with a frantic energy. Her hands, heavy with gold rings, twisted a silk scarf in her lap. The clatter of her bracelets had been silenced. She kept glancing at the main entrance, a nervous tick. Then they arrived. Sarah Jenkins entered first. She wore a simple cream-colored coat over a matching dress, the fabric soft and unassuming, yet it drew every eye. She was pale, the exhaustion of childbirth still etched beneath her eyes, but her chin was up. The gesture transformed her. She was not a victim seeking retribution. She was an owner taking inventory. Her hand rested for a moment on her flat stomach, a gesture no longer of fear but of memory, of purpose, for Amelia. Behind her, a quiet declaration of power, was Reginald Vance. His presence was a gravitational force, bending the room's atmosphere around him. He gave a single, almost imperceptible nod to the board, then guided Sarah to the two empty chairs directly opposite Arthur. "Ms. R." Albright, his associate, set a slim laptop and a single-file folder on the table with practiced silence. And in a simple chair set against the wall, almost forgotten, was Maria Rodriguez, the junior curator assistant, the witness. Her hands were clasped in her lap, her eyes fixed on Arthur. She had not said a word. She had recorded everything. The chairman of the board, a stoic man named Elias Thornton, cleared his throat. The sound was a hammer blow in the silence. "Mr. Sterling," Elias began, his voice flat. "This emergency session has been called to address the claims presented by Mr. Reginald Vance, executor of the Vance-Jenkins Trust." Arthur finally looked up. His eyes were bloodshot. He attempted a sneer. "Claims, fantasies, a desperate power play by a disgraced employee. This is absurd. I have dedicated 2 decades of my life to this institution." He tried to gather momentum, to launch into a monologue, but his voice was thin, reedy. "I took a provincial collection and I forged it into a global beacon of culture. You forged nothing." Reginald's voice cut through him, not with volume, but with the chilling precision of a scalpel. "You were a steward, a temporary caretaker, and your stewardship is over." Reginald nodded to Ms. Albright. She turned her laptop screen toward the board. On it, a spreadsheet glowed. "The credit lines you leveraged against the collection have been called," Reginald stated. "The personal loans you secured using the museum's name as collateral are due. The accounts are frozen. The Whitman, under your directorship, is insolvent." A low murmur went through the board. Arthur's face contorted. "A procedural error. My lawyers will—" "Your lawyers have been notified," Reginald said, "as has the district attorney's office, regarding certain irregularities in the acquisitions budget." He paused. "Specifically, the funds diverted to a marketing consultant for services never rendered." Eleanor flinched as if struck. Her head snapped toward Arthur, her eyes wide with betrayal. He refused to look at her. He was sinking, and he would not be a life raft for anyone else. "These are lies," Arthur hissed, his knuckles white on the table's edge. "Slander. You have no proof of mismanagement." "Only the word of a vindictive woman I was forced to terminate for gross incompetence." He gestured dismissively at Sarah. Sarah met his gaze. She did not flinch, she did not speak. She simply looked at him. "On the matter of mismanagement," Reginald said, his voice dropping, "we have a witness." His gaze shifted to the young woman by the wall. "Ms. Maria Rodriguez!" All eyes turned to Maria. She seemed to shrink under the sudden attention. Her breath hitched. She looked at Sarah, who gave her the slightest nod, a silent transfer of strength. Maria's shoulders straightened. Ms. Albright walked over and placed a small digital audio recorder on the table. "Ms. Maria Rodriguez," Reginald prompted gently, "will you tell the board what you observed on the afternoon of October 12th, the day Ms. Jenkins was fired?" Maria's voice, when it came, was soft but clear, each word a perfectly placed stone. "Mr. Sterling called Sarah into his office. He told her she was a liability. He said her pregnancy was an embarrassment he would not tolerate." "Ah!" Arthur lunged to his feet. A lie! The fabrications of a junior assistant trying to curry favor? Maria pressed a button on the recorder. Arthur's voice, thick with contempt, filled the atrium. A sentimental fool, just like your uncle. This museum is not a charity ward for unwed mothers. You are a loose end. A sloppy, emotional, pregnant loose end. And I, the recorded voice gloated, am a man who prizes cleanliness. The silence that followed was heavy with implication. The recording continued. Eleanor's voice now sharp and venomous. She's a liability, Arthur. The board will see it. We just have to frame it correctly. Incompetence, mistakes, focus on the paperwork. No one cares about the truth. Eleanor let out a small, strangled cry. She stared at the recorder as if it were a bomb. A collective gasp rippled through the board members. Elias Thornton, the chairman, picked up a document from the folder Ms. Albright had provided. His face was granite. He looked at Arthur, then at the board. I am reading now from the founding charter of the Vance Jenkins Trust, the document that created this museum. His eyes found Arthur's. There is a clause, Codicil A, the integrity clause. Elias cleared his throat and read. His voice was a funeral dirge. The assets of this trust are consecrated to the preservation and presentation of art for the public good. They are not to be used for the glorification of any single individual, nor are they to serve as a vehicle for ego. True value isn't found in objects, but in the integrity that protects them. The words landed in the room and detonated. Arthur flinched. The words, a physical assault. The philosophy he had mocked was now the epitaph of his career. The codicil grants the executor, Elias continued, his voice heavy, full authority to reclaim all assets in the event of moral disrepute. The evidence is conclusive. It was over. The fight had gone out of Arthur. He stared at his hands, a broken man in a bespoke suit. But Eleanor was not finished. She was a cornered animal. She stood, her red dress a scream for attention. Her jewelry, once loud, now seemed to make no sound at all. Tears streamed down her face, ruining her perfect makeup. You can't do this, she pleaded, her voice rising to an hysterical pitch. She looked wildly around the table, her gaze landing on Reginald. Uncle Reginald, please. He promised me. He said we would run this place together. I did everything for him. Reginald's expression was one of profound, weary sadness. He lied to me, Eleanor sobbed, clutching her stomach in a grotesque parody of Sarah's protective gesture. I gave up everything for him, and now I have nothing. I'm left with nothing. And I'm pregnant with his child. The declaration hung in the air, a desperate final gambit. Arthur's head snapped up, his expression one of pure, unadulterated shock. He stared at Eleanor, his mouth agape. Reginald Vance did not raise his voice. He did not have to. The quiet words he spoke next held the crushing weight of a collapsing mountain. No, you are not, he said. The words were simple, factual, devastating. He looked at his niece, the last flicker of familial warmth in his eyes extinguished, replaced by a cold, hard finality. I spoke with your doctor this morning, Eleanor, after you tried to liquidate your personal trust fund, the one my brother established for you. He let the silence stretch, twisting the knife. You are a liar, he said, his voice a low whisper that carried to every corner of the room. And you have brought shame upon our family's name for the last time. He looked at the board, then back at the wreck of the woman in the red dress. "You are no longer a Vance." A hush fell, profound and absolute. It was a public disownment, an excision. Eleanor crumpled as if her bones had dissolved, falling back into her chair with a silent, guttural sob. Her downfall, spectacular and complete, was her own creation. Arthur stared at her, then at Sarah, then at Reginald. He saw the truth. There were no allies, no escape routes, no more stages to command. The great Arthur Sterling was an emperor with no clothes, no empire, and no art. The room was still. The battle was won. The wreckage was total. Sarah looked across the table, past the broken figures of Arthur and Eleanor. Her gaze found Maria, still sitting by the wall, a silent observer to the justice she had helped deliver. Sarah held her gaze, a question and a promise in her eyes. The old Whitman was dead. A new one would be born from its ashes. It would need people of integrity. Maria's eyes filled with tears, but she did not look away. She took a deep, steadying breath. She pushed her chair back. Maria stood. The grand atrium hummed with a different kind of silence now, not the tense, expectant quiet of an impending verdict, but the heavy, settling stillness of total devastation. The chill from the climate control no longer felt aggressive. It felt appropriate, a cold hand on a fevered brow. The faint scent of Windex had been replaced by the acrid tang of defeat, clinging to the polished marble and the expensive fabrics like a shroud. Arthur Sterling remained slumped in his chair, a man hollowed out. His expensive suit, once a second skin of power, now draped him like a borrowed costume. The gray pallor under the track lighting intensified, making him appear sculpted from ash. He didn't stir, didn't look up. He was a statue of ruin. Eleanor Vance, a crumpled splash of crimson, sat equally still. Her sobs had subsided into choked, rattling breaths. Her perfectly coiffed hair was askew, a single strand plastered to her tear-streaked cheek. Her jewelry, once a defiant clang, was utterly silent, as if refusing to draw attention to its disgraced wearer. The gold had lost its gleam. She was a woman utterly stripped, her self-caused downfall, a stark, undeniable truth etched into the air. Maria Rodriguez, standing tall, was the first to move. Her gaze swept over the shattered remnants of her former bosses, then settled on Sarah. A silent question passed between them, a shared understanding forged in the crucible of injustice. Maria offered a small, resolute nod. She had played her part. She had stood for truth. She would stand for what came next. Reginald Vance rose, his movement deliberate, unhurried. He crossed to Ms. Albright, who had already closed her laptop, her expression a study in contained triumph. He spoke a low word, a quiet instruction. She nodded and exited through a service door, her departure as discreet as her arrival. The air thinned, becoming less charged but no less significant. Reginald then turned to the board. Elias Thornton, the chairman, met his gaze, his own face unreadable. "Gentlemen," Reginald's voice resonated, calm and commanding. "The museum is now under the interim administration of the Vance Jenkins Trust. All operations effective immediately are suspended. Financial audits will commence. A new direction will be charted." He paused, his gaze sweeping the weary faces before him. "Those of you whose integrity remains unquestionable will be contacted regarding your continued involvement. The others," He left the unspoken hanging, a chilling pronouncement. Elias Thornton stood, a heavy sigh escaping his lips. "Understood, Mr. Vance. We will cooperate fully." He looked at his fellow board members. "This meeting is adjourned." The board members, a phalanx of silent suits, began to shuffle out, their footsteps hushed against the marble, each man carrying the weight of institutional failure. None dared meet Arthur's eye. None glanced at Eleanor. They simply vanished, leaving a vast, echoing space behind. The grand atrium, once a battleground, was now a tomb. Arthur finally stirred. He lifted his head, his eyes vacant, unfocused. He blinked slowly, as if emerging from a deep, troubled sleep. His lips moved, forming a dry, crackling sound. Eleanor, roused by his movement, looked at him, her face a ravaged mask of accusation and despair. She had given him everything. He had promised her everything. Now, nothing remained. "You said you were pregnant." Arthur's voice was a barely audible rasp, scraped from a parched throat. He didn't look at her, but at the empty table before him. "A child! Our child!" Eleanor flinched. The words were not an accusation, but a hollow echo of her own desperate lie, the lie that had broken her, the lie that had disowned her from the only family she had left. "You're nothing," she whispered, her voice choked with a raw, ugly grief. "Just a monster." Arthur gave no sign of having heard. His gaze drifted around the vast atrium, to the empty pedestals where priceless works of art had stood, to the bare walls where masterpieces had once hung. The grandeur was still there, the marble, the soaring space, the light. But it was a stage without players, a temple without gods. "I built this legacy. I elevated it." His hands twitched, an involuntary gesture toward the vacant space, as if he could conjure the absent beauty back into being. Reginald Vance watched him, his expression one of profound, weary disappointment. Not anger, just the quiet sorrow of a man observing a natural disaster. He had seen this coming, had tried to warn Robert. But some men must fall to learn they cannot fly. A single tear traced a path down his cheek. The squeal of tires on the street outside, a faint siren wailing in the distance, slowly grew louder, drawing nearer. The harsh blue and red flashing lights began to strobe against the immense windows, painting the marble walls with fleeting, violent colors. They were external, yet they seemed to reflect the chaos within. The temperature in the room, already cool, seemed to drop further, a chill that seeped into bones. Two uniformed officers entered, their presence jarringly ordinary against the backdrop of shattered grandeur. They moved with quiet efficiency, their boots making soft thuds on the polished floor. One carried a warrant. Reginald met them at the entrance to the atrium. He exchanged a few low words. The officer nodded, his gaze sweeping over Arthur, then Eleanor, then Sarah. "Mr. Arthur Sterling?" the officer asked, his voice calm, professional. "We have a warrant for your arrest, misappropriation of funds, fraud, embezzlement." Arthur looked up, his eyes finally focusing, wide with a dawning horror. The names of the charges were like blows. His face crumpled. "No, this is absurd. I am the director. These are merely accounting discrepancies." The officer was unmoved. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." Eleanor watched, her face slack with a mixture of terror and dark satisfaction. This was it, the absolute end. Her own ruin, devastating as it was, felt almost secondary to his. A small, poisoned victory. Arthur struggled to his feet, his movements stiff, uncoordinated. His once immaculate suit was now visibly rumpled, stained with the sweat of his despair. He swayed, his hands reaching out not for help, but for something to steady himself. There was nothing, just the vast, empty air. "This is an outrage," he croaked, finding a fleeting spark of his old bluster. But it died quickly, a sputtering flame. "My reputation, my career—" "Your reputation," Reginald said, his voice quiet, "is what you have made it, Arthur, and your freedom is a consequence of your choices." The officers took Arthur by the arms, gently but firmly. He offered no resistance, a puppet whose strings had been cut. He looked back one last time at the cavernous space, at the empty walls, then at Eleanor, who turned her face away. His gaze lingered on Sarah, standing serene and unyielding, a cream beacon in the stark hall. He opened his mouth, perhaps for one final desperate monologue, but no sound emerged. They led him away. His footsteps faded, swallowed by the immense space. Eleanor remained, a statue of red. The officers glanced at her, but their warrant did not extend to the heartbroken mistress. She was left to her own particular hell, forged by her own hand. Sarah watched Arthur go, a quiet release settling over her. The years of injustice, the public humiliation, the personal betrayals, all of it was finally, irrevocably resolved. She felt Amelia stir, a soft, small warmth in her arms. Her daughter was awake. Maria, standing a little distance away, met Sarah's gaze. A new energy coursed between them, a shared purpose, unspoken but palpable. The old Whitman was dead. A new one would be born. And it would need people of integrity, like Maria. Sarah shifted Amelia slightly, adjusting the delicate wrap. The baby's eyes, dark and wide, blinked up at her mother. Amelia gurgled softly, a sound of pure innocence in the opulent, scarred hall. Sarah looked at her daughter, a profound tenderness filling her. Amelia, her new beginning, the reason for everything. Reginald approached Sarah. He looked at Amelia, a soft, rare smile gracing his lips. He touched Sarah's cheek, a gesture of quiet pride and deep, familial love. "Your uncle would be proud," he said, his voice thick with emotion. Sarah nodded, her chin up, her gaze steady. She looked down at Amelia, then out into the empty, waiting space of the museum. The cold marble, the high ceilings, the silent promise. This would be a place of integrity, a place for art, a place for truth. She held her newborn. She walked forward,